Me and the Movies, a personal retrospective. Hello and welcome to something a little different this week. A couple of years ago I did a little retrospective video explaining my own personal history of becoming a Doctor Who fan, and today I want to talk about how I became a movie fan, and the way in which movies have impacted me, my history with them, memorable experiences and so forth. Now I would be lying if I told you I could remember the first movie I ever saw, as no doubt I would have been exposed to movies on television at a very early age. Indeed, I have a very vague memory of being freaked out by the TV miniseries of Salem's Lot watched in a caravan on holiday or somewhere, and then my brother jumping out at me and my mum as we went to the outside lavatory at bedtime, the cunt. However, I can tell you the very first movie I ever saw at the cinema. Again, I was very young and I can't remember much, but it was definitely E.T. I can remember coming out of the movie with my family feeling like I had just had the most magical experience imaginable. Now the first movie I ever saw on video was, wait for it, Star Wars, and I can certainly remember the excitement of getting our first video recorder at some point in the early 80s and wanting to rent Star Wars, Star Wars, Star Wars. I also have a strong memory of getting to see the Roger Moore James Bond movie Moonraker at junior school one Christmas, which went down a bomb as you can imagine. I did not get to see too many movies at the cinema as a kid, to tell you the truth, as we did not have one close by or anything like that, but I do remember getting to see Return of the Jedi one school holidays and going with my mum, my friend Chris and his mum, and I can vaguely remember some bits like the hoverbike chase in the woods and thinking how awesome it was. I remember seeing a film magazine previewing Gremlins and Ghostbusters pretty much across the page from one another and thinking they looked awesome, as well as the kerfuffle over the violence in Gremlins and Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, but I didn't get to see the first two in the cinema. Temple of Doom. Honestly, I'm not sure whether I saw it in the cinema or not. I've always had a feeling that I did, and yet I cannot remember anything specific about the actual event. About the only thing I can remember is talking with my friend Matthew about the cuts made to the movie and us both thinking what a bunch of tossers the censor happy wowzers were. Ha. We would have been like 8 or 9 or something, lol. Whether I saw Temple of Doom at the cinema or not, it was a long time before I saw another. Of course, I still grew up with movies on TV and on video. The likes of Raiders of the Lost Ark, Jaws, Close Encounters and the Moore Bond movies were staples of my childhood, as were Back to the Future and Ghostbusters and young Sherlock Holmes and so on, as well as rather more adult fare like The Terminator, Aliens, Fright Night and A Nightmare on Elm Street. The latter two of which both scared the fucking shit out of me and made my parents very much regret letting me watch them, haha. Gremlins and Jedi were actually the first films I ever owned on video. I am fairly sure my local video shop owner flogged my mum a couple of pirates on the cheap for my birthday, lol. I still remember the trailers on the Gremlins VHS. One for Rocky IV and one for Crazy for You with the Madonna song. How random is that? I do not have them anymore, however, as a few years later I got into Doctor Who and, being short on pocket money, used them to get my connected friend to tape me some Pirate Who stories instead. Oh dear. My brother was a massive movie nut and had a massive video collection, mostly pirates, haha, except for a couple he had actually won from video magazines like The Stepfather and Link, both of which remain classics to this day. I was heading into my early teens when I finally got to see another movie at the cinema, this time just with my brother, which was Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, and later that same year did the same with Back to the Future 2. Fucking loved both of them, of course. Over the next couple of years I saw many more films at the cinema with my brother, including Back to the Future 3, Gremlins 2, Arachnophobia, Die Hard 2 and The Hard Way. In the early 90s we moved to Australia, and the very first film I saw at the cinema in a totally new country was, wait for it, Terminator 2 Judgment Day. Now you do not get a better first new movie in a new country than that. That leads me on to the first time I saw a movie at the cinema that was not only a big disappointment but which I actually fucking hated, and that was, of course, the stupendous shower of shit that was Alien 3. Oh dear me. I had never seen a bad movie at the cinema before. Of course I've seen many since, but it was a new experience for me then. A cinema finally opened up just up the street from me at the beginning of 1993. And although I had to look this up as I did not remember it, and yes I keep records of this sort of thing because, if you did not know by now, I'm a massive fucking geek. The very first film that I ever saw by myself at the cinema was actually Home Alone 2, Lost in New York, and it was swiftly followed, and I do mean swiftly as in later that same day. I watched Home Alone 2 in the morning, had lunch at the cinema and then went in for another, was Bram Stoker's Dracula. Nice double feature there. That cinema would be my cinema for the next 20 years. Obviously we are now heading into the mid-90s and into no longer being a child, so even though I saw many good films in that decade, there are perhaps less memorable overall experiences. Though I do remember having to go down to the city to see Scream at a different cinema. Now honestly I'm not sure if I had to as my cinema did not get it, or I just saw it as I was at business college in the city at the time, as either is possible, but it stands out for that reason. In the 90s my brother actually got himself a home theater projector so we watched most movies at home on a big screen too, interestingly enough. One of my favorite 90s movies I did not actually get to see until 2001, which is of course the Swedish romantic comedy drama Show Me Love. It didn't come out here until late 2000, and I remember reading an article on it in a newspaper, but it didn't come to any cinema near me and it took until late 2001 when it was released on video and I rather fell in love with it. Now we are up to more recent times. The memorable experiences are few and far between, though oddly enough, Emma Watson actually appears in 3 of them. In 2010 during my cinema visit to see Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1, I actually experienced the cinema breakdown for the first time. I mean, there had been 1 or 2 minor instances such as them starting to show a film upside down once. But this is the first and only time that a film actually broke down in the middle. Right in the middle, in fact, of the Godric's Hollow sequence where Harry and Hermione are being attacked by the snake. The screen went dark, and stayed dark. Eventually everyone got up and went out to see what the fuck was going on. They actually offered people full refunds as they had no idea if they were going to be able to get it back up and running anytime soon, and some people took it. I did not, as I wanted to see the rest of the fucking movie, and luckily it was literally just like 2 minutes after they made this offer and some people left that they did get it back and we all traipsed back in to watch the rest of the film. In 2012 I moved interstate and the very first film I saw in that new state and in my new local cinema was, funnily enough, The Perks of Being a Wallflower. That was pretty memorable, as by this time I had become a big fan of Emma, so was very aware of the film and very much looking forward to it, and it was a superb flick to boot, so the fact it was also the first film I saw in Queensland in my new local cinema made it even more memorable. And the most recent memorable experience was actually last year, Emma again, with Beauty and the Beast. And this was memorable because we had a cyclone supposedly bearing down on us, the most powerful category there was, and it had been on the verge of arriving for several days, so much so that I had not gone the first few days the film was released, but eventually I'm like, fuck this. But that Monday was the day all the newscasters were hysterically proclaiming that it was coming our way today, possibly even by lunchtime, and the film wouldn't even finish by lunchtime, so there was the distinct possibility I was going to get blown away by more than just the film lol. But you know what? I went anyway. That's how hard, and hardcore, I am. I was like, it's been 3 fucking years since I've seen Emma on the big screen, which was fucking Noah, as neither Aggression nor Colonia had gone to the cinema here, or at least not my cinema, And I'm like, fuck you cyclone, I'm going. In the end it went somewhere else further down the coast, but it was still pretty interesting going to the cinema and wondering if the power would go out or the roof blow off at some point during the film, lol. And that more or less brings us up to date. I have said before that I do not think movies are as good as they used to be, and in fact I've thought that since pretty much the beginning of the 2000s. But there are still some good films, even if most of my real love is still reserved for the films I grew up with in the 80s and 90s, which include some 70s movies as well, of course. About 4 years ago my old TV finally gave up the ghost and I bought a new larger one, along with a Blu-ray player, which did a lot to revive my interest, especially seeing old classics like Ghostbusters, Trading Places, Splash etc. in HD and looking all shiny and gorgeous etc. So yeah, that's my story, and why I'm a movie nut. What's your story?